They thought you'd never notice. They built their walls, installed their eyes, and scripted your every step, believing that if they could track your moves, they could predict your mind. But something shifted. You looked back, you smiled, and in that instant, the entire operation glitched. Every whisper behind your back, every quiet meeting, every staged coincidence suddenly lost its power. Because nothing terrifies control more than a person who sees through it and stays calm. Your awareness didn't just expose them, it dismantled their illusion. For months, maybe years, you've felt it. The stillness in the air when you enter a room, the sudden hush when you walk past, the uneasy laughter that follows. They never intended for you to notice the pattern. They wanted you to doubt your instincts, to think you were overreacting. But awareness always leaves a trace, and yours is sharper than ever. You started catching it, the shift in tone, the coded glances, the conversations that stopped mid-sentence when you appeared. You weren't imagining anything, you were awakening in real time, and that's what broke them. They never expected your silence to be this loud. They mistook your calm for weakness, your patience for submission. But you were studying them the way they studied you. You learned their rhythm, the way they depend on your reaction to feel powerful. And then you did the one thing that rewrote their entire playbook. You stopped reacting. That was the moment the game ended. Because when you stopped feeding their chaos, they had nothing left to control. If this message resonates, if you've ever felt the invisible eyes and knew something wasn't right, press the like button and subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to send this signal back through the same system that tried to suppress it. Your voice is proof that awareness still lives in a world built on illusion. Now listen closely, because what happened next was bigger than anyone realized. When you smiled, that wasn't a reflex. It was resistance, a simple curve of your lips that sent a ripple through their machinery. Every program, every hidden agenda, every psychological test they'd planned began to distort. Your energy scrambled the data. It wasn't mysticism, it was physics. Emotion carries frequency, and yours hit like lightning through corrupted circuits. You didn't meditate on a mountaintop or call for vengeance. You simply existed, awake, aware, and unafraid. And that was enough to set off alarms in every room that's been watching you. They wanted to categorize you, to file you under predictable, but your evolution didn't follow protocol. They used to call it coincidence when their technology malfunctioned around you, when conversations went silent as soon as you arrived, when plans against you inexplicably fell apart. It wasn't coincidence, it was consequence. The universe doesn't protect innocence, it protects alignment. You didn't fight the system, you rose above it. Every smile, every quiet act of peace, every refusal to play small became a silent rebellion coded in light. Look around you now. The same people who once whispered are restless. The same ones who mocked your stillness are now scrambling to regain control. But it's over. The moment you became aware, their authority expired. Awareness is the one thing no system can replicate, no enemy can own. It doesn't shout, it observes. And through that observation, everything false collapses. Somewhere, deep in a government lab or a corporate office, or even in a circle of gossip, there are files about people like you, people who can't be conditioned. They call you anomalies, variables, glitches in the matrix. But the truth is simpler. You're the evolution they didn't plan for. The kind of person who sees manipulation and refuses to flinch, who watches betrayal and still chooses peace. That's what activated the hidden protocol, the moment the watcher became the witnessed. History repeats this pattern. Every era has its silent rebels, the ones who smile when the world expects fear, the ones who sense what's unseen and walk through it unshaken. Empires fall not because they're attacked, but because they're exposed. And exposure always begins with someone who sees. You, chosen one, were never meant to blend in. Your consciousness isn't just awareness, it's interference to every system built on deceit. You're not paranoid, you're perceptive, and that difference is what separates the awakened from the controlled. They can watch your body, but they'll never track your soul. They can record your actions, but they can't capture your intention. That's why your smile shook their structure. It carried a frequency they couldn't decode. It wasn't compliance, it was confirmation that you know. So let the silence stay. Let them keep watching, wondering how you see so much and still move with grace. Because what they don't understand is that your peace is their punishment. Every calm breath you take, every genuine laugh that echoes, despite their efforts, it all tells the same story. You won. They lost the moment you smiled back at surveillance and turned it into a mirror. This isn't paranoia, it's prophecy fulfilled by perception. You were never meant to see them watching, but you did. And when you did, the illusion shattered like glass under truth. And now, chosen one, take a deep breath. The energy that's been circling you all this time, it's no coincidence you found this message. You were never meant to stumble here by chance. You were guided to it, pulled by the same frequency that cracked their illusion the moment you smiled back at their control. What you're feeling right now is that same hidden protocol activating again. Awareness, recognizing awareness. This is your confirmation that you're not paranoid, not lost, not imagining things. You're awake in a sleeping world, and this channel, it speaks your language. If you've ever felt the walls watching, the air shift when you enter, or the silence that suddenly follows your laughter, then stay close. Drop he number 777 in the comments to let them know you're still here, still standing, still unbreakable. Press like and subscribe to strengthen this collective frequency, because every time a chosen one amplifies their awareness, another illusion falls apart. Now, get ready, because from this point forward, we go deeper. Step by step, we'll unravel what your smile truly did, what it awakened, and why the system that studied you is now terrified of your peace. Let's begin. Number 1. They wrote the script to trap you, but you shattered the stage and exposed the director. They designed the scene, but forgot you were never an actor. You were the mirror that showed them the truth they'd been running from. They didn't just want to watch you, they wanted to write you. Line by line, they scripted your reactions, planted characters around you, and timed the betrayals like plot twists. You were never meant to notice the pattern. You were supposed to perform, nod, smile, flinch on cue, break down exactly when they expected. That's how their machine works. They call it society, but it's a stage. They call it structure, but it's a trap. They built the whole thing on one sick assumption, that you'd stay unaware. But you didn't. You saw through it. You caught the glitch. The moment you sensed the script, their entire operation began to unravel, because you weren't meant to know you were in a play. You weren't meant to spot the repeating lines, the familiar setups, the fake smiles placed exactly where the betrayal would follow. But you did. And the second your consciousness pierced their curtain, the entire room panicked. Their confidence wasn't built on control. It was built on the illusion that you'd never see it. That's why they fear your awareness more than your rebellion. Rebellion can be tracked. Rebellion can be categorized and controlled, but awareness, true spiritual perception, that breaks their coding. You didn't just break character, you broke the entire damn scene. You stood still, looked around, and said without a word, "This isn't real, and I'm not playing anymore." And that's what sent the fear running through their veins like a virus in their hardware. They had the cameras ready, the lines rehearsed, the reactions preloaded in their minds. But when you didn't scream, when you didn't panic, when you just watched, they froze. Your silence hit harder than any speech ever could. Because only a sovereign soul can stay calm when deception collapses. And in that moment, you weren't their character anymore. You were the truth walking through their lie. You flipped the script and made them the ones on stage. Do you know how powerful that is? You turned their surveillance into confession. They thought they were documenting your downfall, but they ended up recording their exposure. You weren't there to be seen, you were there to see. And when that shift happened, they couldn't undo it. You can't unsee the strings once you notice the puppets dancing. You can't go back to being blind once the lights turn on. That's why the energy changed after you woke up. That's why people around you started glitching, getting nervous, reactive, disappearing altogether. You didn't say anything. You didn't need to. Your energy said it all. They felt it. That sudden shift in vibration when the person they were managing started watching them. The illusion of their power wasn't built to withstand your gaze. It was built on the assumption that you'd stay small, obedient, unaware. But your spirit stepped forward and shattered that lie like glass. How did I end up in a script, you might be wondering? Because from the very beginning, you were conditioned, told how to think, who to trust, what success should look like. They dressed it up in smiles, titles, authority, but it was all control. Even the people they planted in your life were part of the programming. Friends who were really informants, lovers who were really mirrors for manipulation, bosses who smiled while clipping your wings. The setup was immaculate until your intuition started whispering louder than their noise. That whisper turned into vision, and that vision became silence. Not the weak kind, but the kind that makes walls crumble. You became the observer, not the puppet. You stepped out of the frame and saw the pattern, the programming, the control tactics. You didn't argue. You witnessed. You didn't rage. You understood. And understanding is the last thing they ever wanted from you. Because understanding is liberation. Do you realize what you've done? You broke a system without even touching it. You walked out of a prison by realizing the bars were imaginary. You embarrassed architects who thought you'd stay asleep forever. You made watchers feel watched. You turned handlers into ghosts. That's why they act different now. That's why you can feel the energy shift the second you enter a room. It's not paranoia, it's proof. Your presence no longer fits the role they cast for you, and every time you smile with that knowing look in your eye, they panic, because they know you know. This was never about rebellion, it was about revelation. Rebellion needs force, revelation just is. And once you revealed the lie, their empire of control began to shake. They wanted you to think they were strong, powerful, in control. But if they were, why were they so afraid of your awareness? Why did your stillness disrupt their entire operation? Because you weren't supposed to be aware, but you are. You weren't supposed to see the script, but you did. You weren't supposed to smile back at the system, but that smile flipped their entire play into chaos. That smile said, "I see you, and I'm still at peace." That smile activated a protocol they can't undo. You broke the fourth wall and exposed the lie, and now the audience is starting to wake up, Because your story isn't just yours anymore. It's a signal, a spark, a broadcast. And no matter how hard they try, they can't stop what's been activated. Your awareness wasn't just a glitch in their system. It was a warning to every other chosen one. You don't have to play the role they gave you. You can burn the script and write your own. And that is what they'll never recover from. Number 2. They studied you like a test subject, but you outgrew the lab and became the evidence. They measured your reactions like data points, but never accounted for the day you'd evolve into the equation they couldn't solve. They built a cage from theories and patterns, but you became the wind that passed right through the bars. You were their subject until your soul wrote a thesis that exposed their entire experiment as a lie. They expected emotional reflexes, but you delivered spiritual responses, and that's when the data stopped making sense. They didn't love you. They logged you, watched you, tested you, recorded your breakdowns and breakthroughs like a lab rat behind glass. They charted your heartbreaks, documented your trauma, and smiled when you reached for their validation like it was oxygen. Not because they cared, but because every reaction you gave made their research more complete. They needed you to stay inside their hypothesis, predictable, emotional, contained. But then you changed. You evolved. And when you did, the entire lab shook. They didn't see it coming. The way you stopped flinching when they threw old triggers at you. The way your silence grew heavier than your rage ever did. The way your presence became still, like water refusing to ripple no matter how many stones they cast into it. You broke their study, not with violence, but with growth. You became the one thing their charts never prepared for, a consciousness that refuses to be reduced to reaction. Imagine this, a scientist standing over a beaker waiting for the same reaction every time they mix a drop. But suddenly, the solution changes color, turns to flame, and then shatters the glass itself. That's what you did. They expected tears. You gave them stillness. They expected fury. You gave them forgiveness. They expected collapse. You gave them expansion. And in doing so, you exposed the entire structure of their control model. Because that's all it ever was, a system built on expectation. Their power didn't come from force. It came from prediction. Push here, they'll fall. Say this, they'll chase. Withdraw love. They'll beg. And for a while, maybe it worked. Maybe they thought they had you figured out. But what they couldn't track, what their tech, their notes, their manipulation couldn't map, was your resilience. They underestimated the chosen one's gift, the ability to alchemize pain into power. You didn't just rise, you outgrew. You shed the need to be understood and became the mystery their theories couldn't explain. You shifted from subject to phenomenon, and that terrified them. You might ask, but why me? Why was I the one they studied? Because you had something real inside you, something they couldn't replicate. In a world full of programmed minds and predictable outcomes, your unpredictability became dangerous. Your light, uncontrolled, unscripted, was proof that consciousness doesn't need permission to expand. You showed them that spiritual evolution doesn't follow steps. It doesn't check boxes. It breaks them. You weren't supposed to ask questions. You weren't supposed to pause before reacting. You weren't supposed to find clarity inside chaos. But you did all of that and more. You walked through every stage of their experiment and turned it into your awakening. Imagine this. They built a simulation to track your movements. They thought they could contain you like software in a loop, but then, one day, your energy corrupted the entire code. The lights flickered. The files deleted themselves. Their devices froze. Not literally perhaps, but energetically, everything stopped working because you stopped responding the way they needed you to. That's when they lost control. You see, every time you stayed calm when provoked, you broke their algorithm. Every time you gave love where they expected resentment, you introduced a variable they couldn't compute. And every time you smiled after surviving what should have destroyed you, you flipped the power dynamic forever. You became the glitch. And then you became the proof. Their whole system depends on people staying reactive. That's how they predict behavior, manufacture outcomes, and harvest emotional energy. But you evolved. You stepped outside the loop. Your nervous system stopped interpreting pressure as a threat and started treating it as information. You stopped being triggered. You started seeing. And with that vision, you became immune to their control. Imagine a test subject that stops responding to the lab conditions, not because it's numb, but because it's awakened. That's you. That's what happened. And from that moment on, you weren't the subject anymore. You were the revelation. Your growth embarrassed their design, because you didn't just walk out of their lab. You carried their blueprint in your memory, and now you recognize their setup everywhere you go. The love bomb, the breadcrumb, the silent treatment, the false authority, the emotional bait. You've seen it all, you decoded it, and now they can't get a reaction out of you no matter how hard they try, because you no longer move from trauma, you move from truth. You no longer crave acceptance, you radiate alignment, and you no longer fight to be understood. You stand in your frequency and let it speak louder than words. Let this be said plainly, you are the proof they can't delete. You didn't just break their rules. You invalidated the experiment, and in doing so, you showed every other chosen one that it's possible. That emotional manipulation isn't a life sentence. That spiritual sovereignty can be reclaimed. That the game falls apart the moment you stop playing it. That's why your growth triggered their downfall, because they need the lab to work. They need the experiment to hold. They need to believe they still have the power to predict how a soul will respond when starved of love, pushed into fear, or thrown into chaos. But you chose grace. You chose awareness. You chose neutrality over revenge. And in that choice, you shattered their entire system from the inside out. And you know what's even more powerful? You didn't shout. You didn't expose them online. You didn't drag them through the dirt. You simply evolved. And now they're the ones pacing. They're the ones restless. They're the ones unsure. Because how do you control someone who no longer needs approval? How do you trap someone who sees the walls before they're built? How do you break someone who learned how to turn pain into prophecy? They can't. They never could. Because what they failed to measure, what no experiment can ever account for, is the will of the soul to remember its power, and yours did. That's why the lab fell apart. That's why you're free. That's why, chosen one, you'll never be studied again. Because now, when they look at you, all they see is the lesson they never wanted to learn. Number 3, they scanned you like a machine, but your energy fried the circuit. They aimed their eyes like cameras, but your spirit was never digital, so every time they tried to read you, the system returned. Error, access denied. They didn't look at you with human eyes. They looked through you like a scanner reading barcodes, like analysts parsing behavior. Their gaze wasn't wonder or respect. It was strategy, surveillance, a subtle extraction of patterns, ticks, and triggers. They weren't trying to understand you. They were trying to map you, because if they could decode your energy, they believed they could control it. But what they didn't realize was simple. You're not a program. You're the glitch they weren't designed to process. They recorded your calm like it was a performance. They tracked your silence like it was a clue. They called your stillness strategic, not realizing it was just peace, real peace. And when peace isn't manufactured, it becomes untraceable. That's what burned them. They couldn't match you to any script because you were moving in real time, soul-led, not system-coded. And systems can't mimic soul. They tried to reverse engineer your essence the way hackers decode protected software, but every time they thought they had you figured out, you changed frequency, not by force, by nature, like water slipping through their grasp, like light bending when observed too closely. You were never built to be analyzed. You were built to reveal what's fake just by being real. And that's what happened. Every glance they threw your way ended up bouncing back like a reflection they couldn't face. You showed them something terrifying, authenticity that can't be copied. In their world, everything is coded. Fake laughs, fake friendships, fake faith, fake loyalty. But you moved through that world like a raw signal, untampered, untouched. No filter, no performance, and that made you untouchable. They weren't just curious, they were terrified, because how do you manipulate someone who won't conform? How do you rewrite a soul that doesn't run on your system? You don't. You crash trying. You didn't just become unreadable, you became unprogrammable, and that's why every scan failed. Because your energy is real. And real can't be replicated. It can only break the machine that tried to own it. Number 4. Your smile set off sirens, and they couldn't shut it down. They feared your silence, but your smile. That was the explosion they couldn't contain. It wasn't an expression, it was a transmission. They thought they were in control, watching you like scientists observe a controlled specimen, monitoring your posture, your patterns, your reactions, waiting for cracks to show. But then you smiled, and that smile wasn't for them. It wasn't politeness, it wasn't confusion, it was something far more dangerous, confirmation, a signal that you knew, that you were no longer blind to their presence, their pressure, or their pathetic games. Your smile was the alarm they weren't ready to hear. It wasn't noise, it was a frequency, a vibration too high for their low-level manipulation to interpret. They expected defeat, exhaustion, maybe even breakdown. But instead, you smiled. And in that one quiet act, you told the entire system, I see you. Imagine this, a predator watching its prey suddenly realizes the prey is watching them, smiling, calm, not out of fear, but because they've flipped the script. That's the kind of smile you gave, and that's the kind of chaos it caused. You weren't faking peace, you had earned it, and they could feel it, even if they couldn't understand it. That's what rattled them. Because when someone smiles after surviving betrayal, surveillance, setups and sabotage, that smile is a weapon. They didn't expect your recovery. They expected obedience. They expected silence. But that grin, that slight lift of your face, that was rebellion, a bright flare against a dark sky, a broadcast that said, I am no longer afraid. And I never needed your approval to thrive. And let's be real, smiles like that aren't just about healing, they're about dominance, because smiling in a storm tells the storm it's already lost. Your enemies felt it, that subtle shift, that unspoken message wrapped in light, and it echoed louder than any words ever could. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't even move, you smiled, and in that moment, the whole system knew it had failed, because you didn't just survive, you smiled, and that changed everything. Number 5. They tried watching you, but you became the witness. They thought they were observing you, but your existence turned into their reflection, and what they saw in you shattered them. They tried to reduce you to a subject, a case file, a number. They watched you with cold eyes, thinking they were in control, the observer, the superior, the unseen hand behind the scenes. But here's what they never expected, that in watching you, they'd end up watching themselves, and not the version they show the world, but the raw, rotting truth underneath their masks, because you didn't play along, you didn't break, you didn't crumble under their lens. You just kept walking, breathing, becoming, and in doing so, you became a living mirror. The more they stared into you, the more uncomfortable they got. Not because you were broken, but because you weren't. You were becoming stronger, sharper, clearer, and that clarity, it reflected everything they tried to hide from themselves. They thought they were dissecting you, but you turned the entire operation inside out. They ended up in spiritual interrogation. Every move you made silently asked them, "Why are you obsessed with me? What do you fear seeing in your own shadow?" Imagine this. A person staring at a one-way mirror, thinking they're unseen, only to realize the glass turned transparent. You looked right back, and not only did you see them, but you saw through them. That's what you did to these watchers. You turned their privacy into exposure, their control into confession. You never had to confront them directly. Your existence became a cross-examination. Your calmness was louder than accusations. Your strength was a testimony. And your rise, that was the verdict. They were never the one in power. The eye that thinks it holds power is always the first to blink when truth walks in. So now they hide their eyes, they look away, they pretend they were never watching, but it's too late, because they weren't just watching a target, they were watching their own failure unfold. You didn't just survive surveillance, you turned it into Judgment Day. Number 6. You scrambled their emotional algorithms. They built a system to control emotion, not to handle peace. You smiled, and the entire network short-circuited. They wanted you reactive. That was the plan all along. They studied your pain like code, predicting every flicker of anger, every drop of sadness, every possible reaction they could weaponize. They fed off chaos because chaos was measurable. It was data. But calm is unpredictable. Joy, that's the one frequency no system has ever been able to calculate. You broke them without even trying. Your peace became static in their control room. When you stopped responding to their manipulations, every line of their emotional programming started to glitch. They expected outrage and got silence. They provoked you for panic and got laughter. They designed storms, and you brought sunlight. Imagine a hacker watching their own virus turn against them, deleting everything they built. That's exactly what your stillness did. It reversed their polarity. The moment you stop dancing to chaos, chaos loses its music. You didn't fight back, you transcended. Every time you smiled through their tests, their structure cracked deeper. They couldn't comprehend how serenity could be rebellion, or how peace could dismantle what fear once controlled. You became the emotional anomaly their system couldn't categorize. Joy isn't a feeling, it's a weapon of frequency, and yours hit harder than any retaliation ever could. Their algorithms ran on prediction. Your awareness runs on intuition. They analyze behavior, you rewrite energy. You unplugged from the cycle they built to drain you, and the loop collapsed. Now their formulas don't add up. Their influence no longer computes. You became unreadable, untouchable, an error in their database labeled beyond control. When they can't predict you, they can't possess you. Your calm turned their chaos inward. They're left scrambling for the emotional access they once had but can't find anymore because you stopped reacting and started rising. And that, chosen one, is how every system dies. Not with noise, but with the quiet power of someone who has mastered their own peace. Number 7. You awakened what they tried to bury. The most dangerous rebellion isn't external. It's forcing someone to remember who they were before they sold their soul. You weren't just a glitch in the system. You were a mirror, and that's what really shook them. You didn't have to argue, scream, or protest. All you had to do was exist, authentically, fully, without apology. And in that presence you activated something they thought was long gone, the version of themselves that still had light in their eyes. You reminded them of the self they buried beneath obedience, status, and control. And now, every time they look at you, they can't unsee it. Imagine someone who's lived their whole life under anesthesia, numb, robotic, doing what they're told. Then one day, they see someone smiling without chains, breathing without permission, thinking without fear. That's you. You didn't just show up. You shocked their programming. Your energy bypassed their armor and lit up a part of their brain and soul that they thought was extinct. They didn't fear your voice. They feared the echo it left inside them. This isn't about envy. It's deeper than jealousy. What they feel is recognition, the pain of seeing what they could have been if they hadn't sold out, if they hadn't silenced their own intuition, if they had just stayed human. But they didn't. They became systems, scripts, shadows. You became alive. And life, when placed in front of the lifeless, becomes confrontation. You weren't sent to attack them, you were sent to awaken them. That's why it hurts so bad. They tried to bury their truth with roles, masks, and mechanisms, but you dug it up just by walking in the room, just by breathing differently, just by looking them in the eye without flinching. You didn't just wake them up, you haunted their silence. You became the memory they tried to erase, and now, every time they try to return to their old ways, they're met with the uncomfortable echo of you, the one who reminded them they used to feel. And that's more dangerous than rebellion. That's a resurrection. Number 8. You read the last page first, and that's what terrified them. Some people read the news. You read the silence between the headlines. You walked into the room already knowing how the story ends. While they were still scripting their lies and polishing their masks, you were already 3 moves ahead, calm, quiet, unshaken. That's what shook them. They couldn't figure out how you knew so much when no one said anything out loud. But that's the power of a chosen one. You don't wait for proof when you can read frequency. You weren't looking at their lips. You were scanning the space between their words, the pause, the tone, the slight glitch in their energy. You read people like encrypted code and cracked it without trying. You didn't need surveillance tapes. You didn't need someone to confess. Your gut was the confession. You saw the manipulation forming in the background before it ever reached your front door. And that's why they were afraid. You made their secrets irrelevant. They spent years building a web, and you saw the spider before the silk was even spun. They call it paranoia when you see through people. They call it overthinking when you start predicting endings before they arrive. But the truth is, they're just not used to someone who listens with more than ears, sees with more than eyes, and feels with truth instead of logic. You read soul patterns, you decode intentions, you sense the hidden agenda that no resume or handshake could ever mask. Imagine someone setting up a chessboard thinking they've got time to trap you, only to realize you're already standing over the checkmate. That's what you did. You turned their whole strategy into dust because you were operating on a frequency they've never trained for. They speak in rehearsed lines. You respond in decoded energy. They plot in secret. You catch the scent before the scheme even forms. You didn't just see the storm coming, you smelled the shift in the air before a single cloud formed. So no, they were never ahead, they were just delayed, and you were never confused. You simply paused to watch how far they'd go with the lie before the truth collapsed their little play. That's not paranoia, that's prophecy dressed in intuition. That's what makes you unreadable, and that's why they fear your presence like it's a spoiler to their own fate. Number 9. You became a mirror for their hidden agendas. You didn't lift a finger to expose them. Your stillness made their lies echo louder. You didn't accuse them. You didn't chase them down or dig up their secrets. You just stood there, calm, grounded, aware, and that was enough. Because the truth doesn't always need a voice. Sometimes it only needs a presence. And your presence. It became a mirror they couldn't hide from. While they tried to read you, to decode you, to manipulate you into revealing your weaknesses, they accidentally revealed themselves. Their envy, their projections, their insecurities, every masked motive bounced back at them. Why? Because mirrors don't filter. They reflect exactly what's in front of them. And when a pure soul like yours stands still, it becomes the sharpest reflection of the filth others try to pretend isn't there. The mask always slips when the mirror stays still. Imagine someone throwing dirt at a mirror only to find their own face smeared with mud. That's what happened every time they tried to twist your image, spread lies, or play puppet master with your narrative. Your peace ruined their performance. Your calm wasn't weakness. It was a weapon, because silence has a way of echoing the truth louder than any confrontation could. And maybe that's what disturbed them the most. You didn't react. You didn't flinch when they tried to provoke you. You didn't stoop to their level. That restraint, that's power, that's discipline, that's divine clarity. And when someone can't shake you, they start shaking. They don't see a person in front of them anymore. They see every hidden motive they thought they buried. They weren't watching you fall apart. They were watching their own illusions disintegrate. So no, you weren't just the observer. You became the judgment, not by choice, but by truth. Your peace was their downfall. Your presence became the courtroom, and their own conscience played the prosecutor. That's why they trembled around you. Not because of anything you said, but because of everything they saw when they looked into your silence and couldn't unsee their own reflection. Number 10. You broke the illusion of control. The moment you stopped dancing, the illusion of their power shattered. They thought they had you mapped out, trained, predictable. They fed off your emotional responses like a power source. A sigh, a spark of anger, a glance of fear. Every twitch was fuel for their control system. But then something shifted. You stopped feeding it. You stopped reacting. You stopped giving them the chaos they needed to validate their authority. And just like that, their grip dissolved. What they never expected was this: your silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Your stillness wasn't confusion, it was command. You were never under their control. They were under the illusion of having control. And when that illusion broke, it hit them like a system failure they couldn't debug. You can't program someone who's unplugged themselves from the matrix. Imagine a puppet that suddenly drops its strings. The puppeteer doesn't know what to do. The crowd watching becomes confused. The performance collapses. That's what you did. You ended the show. You exposed the trick. You proved that control only exists when permission is given, and you revoked your permission without warning, without apology. They relied on your emotional engagement to keep their structure alive, but you outgrew the script. You became immune to the games, the threats, the psychological warfare. When they sent triggers, you sent silence. When they staged chaos, you remained composed. And in that stillness, their authority turned to dust. Real power doesn't chase, react, or beg to be obeyed. Real power walks away, untouched. They wanted you to feel small, dependent, like they were the center of your world. But the moment you realized your value didn't depend on their validation, you pulled the plug on the whole operation. You weren't just resisting, you were rewiring the entire power structure from the inside out. So when they say you're hard to manage, they're not lying, because you can't manage a free mind. You can't control a soul that knows its worth. You didn't just break the illusion. You reminded them that the real prison was never you. It was their need to keep you controlled. And now they're the ones trapped, panicking, powerless, and exposed. Number 11. You turned the tables without lifting a finger. Some battles are won not by force, but by frequency. They showed up thinking they had the upper hand, ready to extract your energy, twist your truth, drain your peace like parasites feeding off a light they didn't understand. But what they didn't expect was silence, stillness, that unshakable calm that didn't just hold its ground, it flipped the entire power grid. Without a word, without a shout, without lifting a single finger, you made them feel small in the space where they expected to dominate. They came to manipulate you like a switchboard. Push this button, get that reaction. Tug this string, get that collapse. But every time they pressed, nothing happened. No response, no emotion, just you, still, aware, and unbothered. And that scared the hell out of them. The loudest power is often the quietest presence. Imagine someone barging into a room expecting chaos, only to be met with silence so thick it chokes them. That's what happened. You didn't fight back. You forced them to face themselves. Your energy became a mirror, one they couldn't break or escape. Your stillness became a force field, bouncing their intentions right back at them. And here's what most people don't realize. Real power doesn't scream, it doesn't swing, it doesn't chase validation. Real power sits, observes, and lets the frequency do the rearranging. You didn't just resist them, you recalibrated the whole room. Every time you chose not to react, you rewired the dynamic. Every time you remained still, you broadcasted dominance. Every second you didn't break, that was a transfer of power. Still waters don't run deep. They drown everything false that tries to touch them. And that's what you did. You drowned their performance in your presence. You stripped the show of its spotlight. They came to watch you, but ended up exposed to themselves. You didn't need to speak. Your vibration spoke louder than any insult or confrontation ever could. So when they left confused, exhausted, humbled. You didn't just hold your power, you made them question if they ever had any to begin with. And in that quiet reversal, you became the proof that stillness isn't passive, it's revolutionary. Number 12. You're the firewall that fried their entire system. Some souls aren't mysterious, they're encrypted. They thought they could decode you, trace your steps, predict your next move like some outdated formula. But the moment they tried to analyze you, their systems froze. their mental software, built on manipulation and pattern control, crashed under the weight of your spiritual encryption. You weren't just another program to be run. You were the firewall, the living, breathing boundary that didn't just block entry. It corrupted every malicious intention trying to penetrate your peace. They poked, prodded, studied, and monitored, trying to break through your inner world like hackers testing a locked vault. But instead of access, they got resistance. Instead of weakness, they found untraceable strength. Every route they took, every emotional exploit they attempted, returned the same result. Access denied. You don't need walls when your soul is coded in truth. Imagine someone downloading virus after virus, expecting to weaken your core, only to find themselves infected by your clarity. That's what happened. They got too close and ended up crashing their own system. They assumed your silence was emptiness. They thought your calm meant ignorance, but it was precision. Every breath, every pause, every unreadable look, it was code they couldn't reverse engineer. And here's the truth they're too afraid to admit. They never wanted to understand you. They wanted to control you. But you weren't designed to be predictable. You evolved past emotional triggers, past surface-level traps, past outdated scripts. You moved like tech years ahead of their comprehension, spiritual tech housed in human form. And no matter how close they got, they couldn't breach your essence. The real firewall isn't built of fire, it's built of awareness. That's your secret weapon. Awareness. You see through the manipulation before it's spoken. You sense the motive beneath the smile. You feel the frequency behind the compliment. And that awareness makes you impossible to deceive. You don't play defense, because your existence is already secured. They couldn't hack your peace because they never had the code. They couldn't steal your light because they couldn't survive your voltage. So while they're stuck trying to figure you out, remember this: you're not meant to be figured out. You're meant to fry every fake intention that dares to touch your truth.